So are you helping other small batch or bespoke clothing brands
Hmm.
to get off the ground now?
Yeah, so I freelance to do that. And it's a really different skill set because I'm not just talking to someone who's a business person, I'm talking to another designer who wants to see their.
All right, we are recording. Today I have on Susie Shaugenessy. Trying to nail that name. Crawford Denim and Vintage Co. is her company. They do small batch clothing. She produces clothing while locally sourcing the fabrics. Pretty unique for this type of business. And I just wanted to talk to her because she is growing rapidly. She's still working, sourcing clothes for other companies, but on the road to taking her company to be a full-time gig. So Susie, thank you for coming on to talk to me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. I'm super excited. So I noticed we talked about this a little. You're sitting in your kitchen. You're surrounded by all your fabrics. Can you tell us at all what you're working on now, what you're trying to develop for your line, and then a little
Yeah.
bit after that, we can get into what makes you unique with your small batches of these clothes.
Well, thanks. I just finished the men's production line. We work with a small manufacturer in Orange County of California, and there's only about a dozen people that work there, and they make units of 100 pieces or more. And then anything for our line that we're creating and sewing locally, we do in smaller batches of about 50 pieces or less. And so I source all of the fabrics myself. Most of them are dead stock, which means that there are jobbers in LA that will buy excess fabric and trims from bigger suppliers. And instead of it going to landfill, they have it for sale. And we're able to purchase it at a discounted rate. And the most of them are vintage fabrics that have been sitting in someone's stock for a long time, or else excess fabrics that were never used in production. So some of the new fabrics that I have that we just made flannels from was from a discontinued Marc Jacobs line. And so we have this really nice high-end quality and European fabrics. But mostly I like to focus on US fabrics and primarily US denim. We still work with Cone Mills, which grows all of its cotton in the South and still mills most of its denim here in the US. And we like to buy from the US made line.
Okay. A lot of interesting stuff to dig into there. I guess the main one is from a business perspective. It sounds really cool that you're using this dead stock from other companies and you're able to get it for a low price. But it seems like there'd be a lot of issues with trying to find where to get it and not always having consistent prices. What made you want to do this? Was it because you could get it cheaper, or was it just an interest in? I know you said you got inspiration from the slow food movement, using more sustainable sourcing. So what made you want to get into this type of sourcing for clothing?
Well, looking at just the excess of yardage and trims, rather than it going into landfill, I wanted to be able to reuse it. And fabric has a really long shelf life. It is an organic material, but it will last for a really long time. And with the slow food movement, one of the objectives of their organization is to look at how we use food and be able to use every part of the farmer's produce, but also keep it really fresh. So you're picking it when it's most ripe and you're getting it to the consumer right away. With finding fabric that may be a little bit older, we're actually keeping it from going into landfill, which has a really, it does not decompose really quickly. So it'll be there for 100 years before it starts to decompose. So with that, we're able to use it. It's fabric that's been, cotton that's been grown before we were using pesticides. And so it's really high quality fabric. Or if it's from mills that are discontinued, we're actually getting to use the life a little longer. I know that was a very roundabout way of associating it with food, but because it's organic material, it's like another way to look at your fabric. It's what you're wearing plus what you're consuming.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, there's just so many places that probably have a lot of that dead stock sitting around. I'm sure this isn't something where there's no room for anyone else to do the same thing. It seems like something other entrepreneurs could be doing.
Yeah. The other thing that is a challenge with it is because it's limited to just either that roll or just 100 yards or something that's very specific. Putting it together and making a collection out of it is where the creative side comes in, and making sure that everything really goes together and looks good, not just season to season, but year to year.
Yeah. Yeah. It would seem like that'd be a challenge if you're trying to find all these individual businesses that are willing to give up this dead stock.
Yeah.
You're saying you're creating a line. Do you have to figure out who's going to give you dead stock of a certain type on a consistent basis and then create a line around it? Or is it like you get it all together and then create your line for that season?
It's a little bit of a mix because there are some things that you just have to jump on when it becomes available. And I've bought things like a year in advance of actually using it, just because I love the fabric or I love the trim, but I didn't have a style that was ready to go just yet. Or I have put together a collection just based on like an idea of what I wanted to do for that season. The current one that I'm working on, the idea was back to Johnny Cash and wearing all black. Nice. And so it's solid black shirts and black selvage denim. So I really did hunt for that black selvage denim for a while. And once I found it, I bought it all. So,
and the whole Johnny Cash line ready to go.
Yeah, ready to go this fall. I even have a model who's he sings like him already.
No way.
Rob Linus, awesome. He's a country star, and so I sponsor him, and he and his band all wear product, and he kind of sounds like Johnny Cash already, and he does good covers, so we're gonna put him in a photo shoot.
Nice. That's exciting. It sounds like you have a lot of projects going on. I know you mentioned that you worked for a bunch of different clothing lines. You still do some sourcing. You still dress people. I want to get into that before I go away from how you're getting the clothing though. I just had one more question. How did you originally get people to let you buy this? I'm assuming there's no deadstockclothingmaterials.com to go and purchase from all these people, but did you have to actually talk to the individual distributors, or how did you get access to these fabrics?
Well, in Los Angeles, it's a lot easier to have access to them. They call them jobbers, but they are organizations that have ready stock. And it's a lot easier because I'm not that far away from downtown LA. I can get there within 30 to 40 minutes and be able to shop the lines. But they also have resources for people who are further away from Los Angeles, where you can contact them and they will send you swatches of the fabrics and be able to work with you on that basis. It does make it a lot easier to be able to shop in person, but they will have some fabrics that are more consistent that they always have available, like muslins and gauzes. It just will vary from day to day as to how much they actually carry. Okay. So novelty prints is something that it makes it a lot more challenging, because if you've decided that you really love this pattern or you really like this print and you go back to buy it and somebody else has already bought it.
Yeah, it's not always going to be there.
No, it's not always there. Or some, they might have had a buyout of 50 yards and you've bought the other 25, and two brands will have the same plaid. And that has happened before in the first year that I was in business, that a friend of mine had bought the same fabric, and we both had similar shirts at the same time.
Like, oh no.
Fortunately, I didn't buy as much as he did, so I sold through all of mine, and he was still on his for a little while.
You got rid of it, and he had all his lines.
But there are other places and other mills that have those kinds of discounted rates for new businesses. Previously, I had worked at Old Navy and for Levi's and for Guess. And so I had a lot of relations with local manufacturers and mills to begin with. And because I knew them, I knew who to contact when I was first starting out and how I wanted to like strategize my business. So I knew that they had sample rolls of fabrics that they might not have gone into production with that I could order from them. It was a little bit more expensive, but I also knew that it was really high quality goods and it wasn't just something that had been sitting around for too long.
Nice. That makes sense. So I feel like we covered how you're getting these materials pretty well. I'm kind of interested in the whole business side because I know you mentioned, I guess it was a jewelry line was your first entrepreneurial type of activity, type of job. What made you want to be an entrepreneur? Like, did you know you're going to start a company? I guess what I'm getting at is, was this company started more because you were just into sustainable clothing, or you knew you were going to be an entrepreneur and this just was your vehicle?
I think it was because I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I didn't expect to do it this way, but I always wanted to design clothes, and I was fortunate that right out of college, or like my senior year of college, I interned with someone that had her own business, and much like my kitchen, we worked out of her house. Nice. And the company was named after her dog. And in addition to doing all of the order fulfillment and the line sheets and accounts receivable, I also walked the dog. And it was very yeah, exactly. Wow. And I was the intern. I did a lot of stuff, but I also got a really good lesson in how to be able to start a business and run it by yourself and run it out of your kitchen before other people were doing that, were exposed to that on a job front. And the first job I really had out of college was with Levi's. And I was able to go to a lot of the factories that they were still sewing in the US and got to learn from people who'd been doing it for years and years and years. And I knew that I wanted to eventually be able to marry those two ideas of working in collaboration with artisans and people who had historic knowledge of how to produce clothing, but also be able to do it in such a small way that I could impact the economics of my community.
Yeah. That's exciting. That definitely seems like you'll have plenty of opportunity to do that. That's cool. So are you currently running your store off Shopify, or do you have a different sort of e-commerce platform you're using? And what was it like for you getting into all that? Was there a huge learning curve, or did you already know all this stuff?
No, I didn't know all of this stuff. I actually, oh, sorry, I lost you.
Akrona. Is it?
Let me see.
Okay.
Sorry. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. I actually hadn't done any of those web platforms before. I did decide that when I was working at Old Navy that I wanted to test the waters and figure a lot of these things out without having a huge economic impact on what I was doing. And I had a do not compete clause within Old Navy, and I couldn't develop any styles or any product to sell that I also overseed within their design department. Yeah. So that's how the jewelry ended up starting. But I was making jewelry for friends, and other people wanted to start buying it. So my sisters and I started the company together. But it was good because we started small on Etsy to begin with, and then started selling at pop-up shops. And so it was really just like a side. Every once in a while we wanted to do it, and we'd make inventory for things and be able to sell it. But it became a really good lesson in how to file correctly for taxes, what kind of platform works the best, how to do customer service, shipping, and branding for an event, and not have it compete with my day job. So then after that, I took a year off between leaving my position with Old Navy and starting Crawford Denim. And I knew it was going to take me a little bit longer to like nuts and bolts start the whole thing, because I wasn't just designing everything. I was also figuring out how to fill out all the taxes and start my own web store. And so that I really like taught myself within 9 months how to write simple code to be able to make the Shopify account a little bit more customized. Mm-hmm. And that takes a long time, especially if you don't normally write code. But they're really easy tutorials that they have, and they have really good websites that refer you to how to modify your specific template, whether you're using something that's free or if it's a paid template.
Yeah. And so was that the biggest challenge for you, like setting all this up, was having to actually do a little bit of code for that Shopify store?
It wasn't that hard in comparison to filing all my taxes and information and business licenses that are necessary, not just for a new business, but also for manufacturing. There was a test that I had to take, regardless if I'm manufacturing it or if I'm subcontracting it. And it is all about employee rights and workers' compensation and fire code and everything. Like if the factory that I use has any kind of faults in it, I could be liable for it too. So It's a very serious test, and it was like stunning for the SATs or the CBEST again. Like it was gnarly. So part of it was just figuring all of that stuff out. And most people hire lawyers to be able to do that, or hire accountants to do it. And I just didn't have it within my budget to be able to do it. But I did have it within my time frame to teach myself how to do it. And it's kind of amazing when you go on the US.gov website, they have a lot of question and answer formats. You can ask for help. There's somebody on the other line who will help you figure out what you need in order to be able to fill out your business forms correctly.
Oh, wow.
And if you don't do it right, they kick it back to you and you have to do it again, which happened on one occasion with one. So
they'll make it painful.
But that's how I've been able to extend to help with other businesses going through the same thing, that they might not have the time or the aptitude to be able to fill out these kinds of forms and need a little direction and make it so that it's right for their business, in addition to being able to marry them to the right mill or contractor or trim supplier that's local to them that they could really utilize.
Okay. So are you helping other small batch or bespoke clothing brands to get off the ground now?
Yeah. So I freelance to do that. And it's a really different skill set, because I'm not just talking to someone who's a business person. I'm talking to another designer who wants to see their product executed. And so that's really like showing them that a creative person can still do all of the financial part and all of the business part, and kind of like not dumb it down, but really make it palatable. Because it becomes really overwhelming if you don't give yourself enough runway. You're also trying to design a line or design a product or design a concept. It can be a little daunting to then have to turn around and like figure out how you're going to do your accounting or how to launch a website.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy how good you have to be at learning different things quickly if you're going to run a business. That's the one thing I'm always most impressed about with entrepreneurs is some of the things that people just force themselves to learn are just like mind blowing.
It takes a long time to train yourself, but it's worth it if you're curious about things.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So do you have any like, I guess, overarching advice you have for anyone trying to do specifically the small batch or bespoke clothing development? I know that you probably, I guess, have had one or two challenges you might not have expected. Did any come to mind?
Well, it was a challenge at first for people to convert on sales. And one of the things that's really hard for a lot of people, they want to discover a new brand and they want to try them out. But having a really understandable, easy way to see what the return policy is key. And that was something that I hadn't seen I just didn't realize like how much I needed to spell it out for people. Mm-hmm. So I offer free returns and exchanges, because undoubtedly you're buying jeans or a shirt, you might not know what my sizing looks like in comparison to something that you normally buy. Yeah. So even though we're pretty standard, I don't know who else they have as a frame of reference in their closet and how they imagine their size to be when they're ordering something from us. So having that free exchange and return policy really alleviates that kind of hurdle that most people have in converting on an online store. I also ship out within 48 hours of an order, which is a lot faster than even Amazon sometimes. And being able to have that connection when someone writes back and says, this didn't fit, this isn't great. They don't know how many people actually work here. They don't realize that it's the owner that they're talking to, not just like someone who's doing this 9 to 5. So I care about what the fit is. And if they're not happy with it, I want to know what I could do to improve. Whether they buy from me again, I need to know that kind of information so that I can help the next customer, not just them.
Yeah, no, totally.
Customer service was a really big surprise to me, and how to articulate that kind of shipping policy and return policy. That was something that I hadn't ever had to deal with before and hadn't really worked retail. So it was something that was new for me to learn.
Wow. You mentioned the sizing thing. That seems kind of interesting because I know a lot of companies deal with that. A lot of the people that do those boxes of clothes try to figure out how to like triangulate sizes based on people's normal brands. Have you figured anything out, or is it just spell out the refund policy? Or do you have a system to kind of get people a feel for what your clothes are going to fit like?
No, I have a pretty good feel for what is more universal. Having worked at Levi's, and I have so many Levi's vintage jeans that I resell, I know that when people ask for a 32, what their expectation is for a standard fit like that. Mm-hmm. I did have, on the men's side, I was really consistent with brands like Levi's and Gap as far as what the sizing was. It was very true to what your expectation would be. For the women's size, I had a different fit model when I first started, and she was more of a junior fit, which is a lot different than what my demographic was. I had a little bit older demographic, women in their 30s who were purchasing things, and their sizing is different. They wanted waist sizes that were 26, 27, 28, so that there was less ambiguity in what size that they should be wearing, and it was fit in with some of the other contemporary denim brands. So I changed my fit model and revamped the entire women's line based on a new fit model.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I guess that was just made it a lot easier on the customer service side and return.
Absolutely. So I had a different expectation than what my actual sales were. And so people who were buying from other contemporary denim brands were also buying my product. And the sizing needed to match that.
That's interesting. Why did you have that misperception about who your customer was?
I think having come from Old Navy, the way that we had done sizing before was more of like a junior, younger customer than what my expectation of what my demographic was going to be. I thought that I was going to be targeting somebody between the ages of 20 and 30, and really I was hitting somebody much older. And so the body difference, if you think about a 20-year-old versus a 30-year-old, different body shape. She might have had a baby, and that is just like a different shaped body after birth.
Yeah, it's totally different for sure.
With age. It's the same thing with men too. There's a big difference between a 20-year-old body and a 30-year-old male body.
Yeah, definitely. No, without a doubt. Yeah, I can imagine how much difference between the junior line. So that's interesting how you have all these problems like this that crop up that you like. There's no way you could have predicted that.
No, and it was a lot of trial and error, but I also gave myself a lot of time and didn't do a lot of batches of clothes that were super extensive. Like I only made 100 or less in some of those pieces. So I wasn't, there are some tops that I have from that first line that just didn't work. And I have 98 tops still left and trying to figure out what to do with them and how to repurpose them in a meaningful way. But then there's other things that I was able to fix and make adjustments on and be able to resell.
Yeah. Nice.
But having less of an investment in some of those units and trying it first really does make a difference.
So another thing that seems like this would be super hard to wrap your mind around for a first business is if you have this store, like a Shopify store, all your clothes, how did you get customers online? How did you get people to start coming and actually converting on the store?
It was really nice of all of my friends to come and buy something the first week that that was amazing. I launched around Black Friday. And I was also really fortunate that my best friend had started his store in Encinitas. It's called Seaweed and Gravel. He had started it a year before I did. And he was going to carry the line in the store. And I also was buying vintage for his shop. Mm-hmm. And so we really had a very compatible aesthetic and brand missions and look to both of our brands. And so he and all of our friends were models for our first photo shoot. And so he had already had a wider audience of clients, not just people who were coming into the store, but also an online presence through social media. And so it really helped the brand to begin with. And it was a lot of leveraging off of his popularity and his brand's popularity. But that's also what my friends were wearing, were my clothes on his motorcycles. Yes. So it really showcased our communal lifestyle and exactly how we live day to day.
Yeah.
So they were very naturally won audience members. And there was a little trial and error with people's fits and figuring out how to give them good customer service so that they could return something if they weren't shopping in store. And even if they were shopping in store and they wanted something customized, the guys at the store would call me and say, like, you know, we have a customer who wants to have this jeans hemmed. Can you do those? And I'd be down the next week to go pick them up and drop them off.
Yeah. That's cool. That's definitely that's an awesome relationship. It sounds like a lot of fun too.
It is. It's really fun. I helped him when he first opened the shop, and I had to learn a lot about motorcycles. But it's been really fun because it's actually helped how I build jeans then too. And for the reach for guys, it's really important that their backside isn't showing when they're reaching forward on the bike. So I've customized
things like that you wouldn't know without being
exactly.
in that community.
Our friend Joe kept on losing his keys every time he was on his bike. And so I made a little locker loop on the inside of the front of all of the jeans. And now it's become a signature, but that's where he would put his keychain so that they wouldn't fly out of his pocket while he was riding.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a super cool community.
It is. It's pretty cool.
Do you have any plans to do this with other communities, or are there any other local ones down there in Encinitas that you want to work with or are thinking about or anything like that?
Actually, I've been asked to go to a couple of different events, and that has really broadened what kind of community base that we are part of. The first one that we were invited to was Desert and Denim, which is out in Joshua Tree, which is very similar to like the group of friends that I already have here in California. It's just an extension, and it's mostly denim and makers that are all small batch, one person shows or two people shows. It's very small community of makers, whether it's leather workers, denim workers. We all have kind of a shared aesthetic and really cater to small boutiques. And so where other apparel brands might be competitive with one another, we have healthy competitions. And it's the first time that I've ever experienced it where if a store was looking to buy a certain fit and that brand didn't have it, but they knew that I did, they would refer my brand. And we both did well and we're both carried in shops.
Yeah.
Another business that I've been, another event that I'm affiliated with now is the Tennessee Motorcycle and Music Revival. And it's a motorcycle and country music festival at Loretta Lynn's Ranch. And it's coming up in October. And awesome. It's like the perfect mix for me personally, because I like the motorcycle community. It's all hand-built, one-of-a-kind pieces that they showcase. And then country music artists that are a little bit more like rock outside of Nashville kind of style. So it's a mix more like Leonard Skinner style music.
Yeah, yeah.
But the Loretta Lynn's family hosts the event, and they're like super warm and inviting. And we were one of the only California brands to come to the event last year. And so my sister and I are going to be traveling across country again this year in an RV and stopping at all of the shops that carry us along the way and doing meet and greets on our path. And working with some of those other places where we're being sold in Arkansas at the mom and pop shop in Fayetteville, just outside of the college campus. And that is like an awesome community. We get to be there for a couple of days and do a workshop while we're there.
Nice.
So building, focusing on working with maybe fewer shops, but making it more meaningful for each of those communities too.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. That's so cool. That huge built-in community all over the U.S. for this stuff. That's exciting.
Yeah, we're gone for about a month and on the road. And but going to festivals and going to events like that, where it's bringing in community of people who value a hand-built bike or a local musician, it really does help them get introduced to our brand, where they didn't realize that there were still people manufacturing jeans in the US and who are focusing on making just 100 units of something.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy too, because it sounds like you have a pretty good business going too, even though it's, you started small batch and very specific community. It sounds like you got a great following. So, I mean, how would you suggest other people do this? Because this seems like such a sustainable type of lifestyle for so many people is, producing something for a community that really wants specific products and you're really fulfilling that need. I mean, how do you think other people could do that? Because was it just that you already knew about this community and knew that they'd want these kind of items, or like, how did you see this opportunity? Because it seems like a pretty fun lifestyle and that would be accessible to a lot of people if they could see it.
Yeah, I think social media really helped because when I was first starting, it was still growing and people weren't paid in the same way that they are now. So things were a lot more naturally evolved online and with influencers. And so that scope of the landscape has changed a little bit, and especially the algorithm between Facebook and Instagram. Like the more people who like your posts, the more they expose it to your followers, and then outside of your followers, then they show it more often. So I have to say it's a little bit more of a challenge to think that you're going to be like an instant hit unless it just catches on fire, and there's no way to predict that. It's also really expensive to pay somebody to be an influencer and have it be meaningful in that way.
Yeah.
I think I was lucky that I was part of a bigger community of makers. And so it's not just me leading a charge. I'm part of a whole contingency of small makers and brands that focus on one of a kind and small builds and unique items that they really value that. Like if you're going to invest in a pair of $200 jeans, you want to know where they were made and who made them, and that people were treated ethically to be able to make those jeans. I'm not just a standalone, and that makes a big difference. It may seem like a niche group or a smaller segment of a community, but it is still a bigger community. So if I was going to start a brand totally new today, I think I would look to find other people who are forging that path, and see what they're doing right and see where else you could join your voice in, because you're stronger kind of all together than you are just singularly.
Yeah, no, definitely. It sounds like you really knew who you're building these kind of products for, and had a good idea about who might want to support that type of work. So that's super cool. I love it. The
imagery really helps tell your story too, and tell what makes your brand different than somebody else's. And it doesn't matter if it's apparel or anything else that you would be creating. Visual imagery and the content that you put behind your brand really does, it immediately will connect with people. And the people that you want to attract will automatically come follow you if they're exposed to that picture or that visual image. I don't always post things that we've taken photos of product specifically. Sometimes I just post a picture of what inspires me to, or what's coming. I do post a ton of old pictures of icons that I like, and they're from a decade, and that can be just as influential about the brand and tells the whole roundabout story of like what's influencing me and what's driving my designs.
Yeah.
So you can look at it in a different way, like while you're developing your brand and before you have a million photo shoots, you could be posting pictures that have inspired you as well.
Yeah, that whole brand and values and aesthetic, like what you stand for.
Yeah.
No,
it helps to articulate that in a way, because everybody's so visual now, and that is the way that things are getting directed to us. It's really good that you like have an image board for yourself and have an idea of what looks you want to put together and how do you want to articulate that to your future consumer.
I like that. That's awesome. that's really good advice. Well, Susie, I'm going to wrap this up and we can chat after, but is there anything else that you'd like to tell people? Maybe, the most important advice for people trying to do this clothing, specifically small batch clothing?
I think one of the things that I've learned a lot is figuring out how to be able to be resourceful, but also making sure that my rent gets paid every month. And that is number one. And I hustle at a lot of different jobs to be able to make sure that rent is paid and that the people that I work with are paid on time. It's better to be slow to produce than it is to be without a house or without products because you can't afford it. And it's really hard. You can be as creative as you want to be, but it's really, you're not going to have a brand if you can't afford it. So being savvy with your budget and being true to your budget will help you in the long run. A number of people will use investors to be able to fund their ideas, but just being smart about how you write those contracts and make sure that you have the propriety of the business so you don't lose your company is number one.
Yes, that's great advice.
It's hard because if you're a creative person, you think the best in people, and
Yeah.
you want all of your ideas to come true, and it's really easy to be lured in to be able to spend somebody's money, but you have to be able to make it back for them. Otherwise, they will take your business and run it for you.